Hi, everyone. Okay, so maybe I should tell you what I've been up to. There's a European Union conference organized by the University of Illinois that's now underway. And of course, it starts at 11 o'clock in the evening, my time. So I attended the first day of it, starting at 11 o'clock at night. So I'm a little bit disoriented because of my time, because of my staying up all night or trying to, and I participate in the conference and make my presentation tonight at 11 o'clock, starting at 11 o'clock. So that's been on my mind, and of course, the European Union is focused on Europe and what's going on in the region today with the crisis in Ukraine. So that's very much tied with this this class. And so let me make sure everybody, we have a few people signed on. That's good. And so then, so I don't forget, let's do the Cyber Campus attendance, and your Cyber Campus number is 211. 211 is your Cyber Campus smart attendance number. So let me go to the Smart Campus site. I'm sorry, not to the Smart Campus, but to the chatting, and put in 211 here in the site. Okay, and so so back to what I was describing earlier regarding the what's going on in Europe today, and maybe I can start by showing you a slide that. Well, let me show you my PowerPoint presentation that I'm supposed to present this evening. And so let me open up my PowerPoint presentation, and this is the PowerPoint presentation I'm going to present. So make sure that you can see this. So we go here, and we go to share screen, and this is the PowerPoint presentation. And let me make that so it's easier to see. So the name of the presentation that I am making is Historical Analogies and Current Strategies, Comparison and Contrasts of Post-Communist Serbian and Russian Irredentism in Europe's Responses. And so it's basically a question is what are the reasons or sources or causes or motivations behind Russia's belligerent behavior? And so I, of course, I'm going to make a presentation. I think I'm going to speak for 15 minutes. And I will start off by presenting like what I presented to you. This is a list of foreign policy motivations of all states in all time. The states of the world have foreign policy motivations that drive their behavior in terms of their interaction with other countries, like between Mexico and the United States, or Mexico and European Union, or Germany and Russia. And this is the inclusive list. And you might see that I've been including that on the lesson plan that I've been sending out to everybody. And so you can see nationalism is part of one category of foreign policy motivations called communal. Nationalism is here. National independence from colonialism or imperialism, national unity or irredentism. In other words, unifying all parts of China that are not part of the Chinese state into China, like Taiwan. China's demands for Taiwan is an example of Chinese irredentism, or Russia's demands for the Donbass is an aspect of Russian irredentism. National dignity, namely being treated equally or being perceived as being treated equally in terms of the status and respect of the state representing the nation in the perception of the public, and national grandeur, dominating other nations, typically on the battlefield, by beating them up in battle. And then participant excitement, frontier dynamics. We don't talk too much about this here. This is more a topic, for example, in Israel's expansion into the West Bank, and also national unity and irredentism is a motivation there. Yeah, irredentism includes territory, and we'll talk more about that. Messianic motivations. This is not so important as a dominant motivation, foreign policy motivation today, but it has been important in the past. Of course, the American Cold Warriors during the Cold War thought that the Soviet Union was trying to spread communism. Bureaucratic vested interests. These are important because, of course, today, this is a focus of a lot of my work, that with the long Cold War, in which trillions, thousands of billions of dollars were spent on huge militaries and huge intelligence agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, and the big economic actors that supply as contractors the military, that these include military vested interests, non-defense bureaucracies, including, like, for example, the various organizations that were created by the United States to carry out containment of the Soviet Union, to contain the Soviet Union, not just military, but, for example, the United States Agency for International Development was an organization created by John Fitzgerald Kennedy when he was president to spread American influence by promoting development and prosperity in the underdeveloped regions of the world. USAID funded the American University in Bulgaria, where I was at for 15 years before coming here. And of course, economic vested interests, including military vested interests, as well as economic vested interests, and personal power, leaders seeking expansion externally in order to maintain their power internally by providing satisfaction for demands of the people by providing them with glory or grandeur in order to maintain your power domestically, and then of course also being motivated by a desire to dominate and rule all of Europe, and then the survival of the regime as a foreign policy motivation, as a regime meaning something going beyond the individual ruler, but the kind of relationship that the rulers, the authorities have towards the public in terms of how they control and manipulate the public. So, and this, as I think I might have, this is all very important for understanding European history and how European Union is supposed to learn from European history in terms of understanding how to deal with Russia today. And so, of course, if you study international relations and political science further, you're going to study about appeasement and about how the not the United States, but London and Paris made the mistake of appeasing Adolf Hitler. And we supposedly cannot make the same mistake with other aggressive powers, because if you give in to the demands of an aggressive, belligerent power, you're not going to make them nice and passive and peaceful. You're going to make them more aggressive, more belligerent. And so that was supposedly what happened in dealing with Hitler. When Hitler said, I demand that I be given control over the German-speaking areas of Czechoslovakia in this artificial state created just 20 years previously, I demand, I want it. And the London government and the Paris government agreed, appeased Hitler with the hope that Hitler would, and Germany would then become satisfied, be appeased, be satisfied, and become more supportive of peaceful conflict resolution in Europe. And of course, it made Germany even more belligerent, more aggressive. And so that was how we explained this kind of behavior. I think we covered this before in terms of the this understanding of German foreign policy motivation under Hitler was the basis for the appeasement strategy. That Hitler's Germany was belligerent because it was motivated by national unity, dignity, and independence as its drives, and that was its primary foreign policy motivation. And in reality, Hitler's foreign policy motivation, Hitler's Germany, Germany under Hitler as an actor in international relations, its foreign policy motivation was instead this: personal power external, national grandeur, and participant excitement. And so the question is, why did this characterization of Germany's foreign policy motivation, if this is true, what was the worldview that characterized the dominant view that the leaders in Berlin in 1939 had to allow them to believe or accept this foreign policy motivations as real and plausible? And what kind of world did they see around them to believe that they could achieve national grandeur by beating up France and everyone else that opposed them in Europe? That Hitler actually could believe that he could become the ruler, dominant dictator of European affairs? What was the understanding of France? What was the perceived nature of the British Empire? What was the perceived nature of the Soviet Union? And we described that earlier as being that basically Hitler's Germany saw the French, the British, the Soviets, the Americans as degenerate, right? The degenerate stereotype. That they could not get organized. They did not know what they wanted. They could not get organized. Of course, in comparison to Hitler's Germany, the Germans knew what they wanted. The Germans knew that they were organized. So if you appease an actor that is belligerent and nasty because it sees opportunity, because it sees you as lacking the will to resist. You lack the will and determination to resist. And if you appease this actor, you're going to confirm that this is in fact true. That Hitler pushed and pushed and pushed Europe to the edge of war in 1938, 1939, and the Europeans gave in. They let him take what he wanted. And that confirmed what Hitler was telling everyone else in the rulership, the authority group in Berlin, that, you know what, this portrayal, I told you, they're degenerate. I'm right. You generals, you're wrong. Because we learned after the war, right, that the German generals said, we were preparing to overthrow Adolf Hitler. We were going to overthrow this very popular, but obviously very polarizing actor within German politics. We were going to organize a coup. We're going to have our generals take their guns and put this guy in jail when he attacked Czechoslovakia, and then Britain and France and the United States and I guess the Soviet Union then declared war on Germany. And then we would use that to arrest Hitler and then go on the radio, this is before television, and explain to the German people that we had to do this. We had to remove Hitler because he was leading Germany into a disaster, into a catastrophe. And so they were preparing this coup, and guess what? The British and the French and the Soviets just gave in. And so the German generals, they did not carry out their coup. And Hitler became even more powerful within Germany, among the elites in Germany, because he looked like he was right, that he's political genius. And so he became even more powerful, and that meant that this worldview became even more dominant in Germany, in the foreign policy making process in Germany, and that meant Germany became even more aggressive and imperialistic. So the lesson learned by the Americans dealing with the Soviet Union was that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, and you must not appease an aggressive power. And that's why Sarah, right? Sarah is here right now, and why I'm here right now, because you don't appease an aggressive power. What do you do? What strategy do you adopt? Not appeasement, but what's the other one? Begins with a C. Containment. Containment. You have to show the aggressive actor that you have the will and determination to stop them wherever they plan and expand their influence. Of course, now the Soviet Union has nuclear weapons, so they're going to work through their supposed agents and spies, including Kim Il-sung, the grandfather of Kim Jong-un of North Korea, Ho Chi Minh, Fidel Castro, Salvador Allende in Chile. All of these people are either fools or active agents of Moscow. And so that's why the Americans fought this war in Korea, of all places, and why South Korea exists. It's a product of the experience, the supposed lesson of Munich, the Munich conference where Germany was appeased and given the Sudetenland at the Conference of the Powers meeting in Munich, Germany, with the British Prime Minister and the French Prime Minister and Mussolini and I think the Soviet Foreign Minister was there, and they appeased Hitler. No more Munichs. No more Munichs. And for the next 2 generations of American policymakers, until the passing of George H.W. Bush, he was the one of the youngest veterans of World War II. For the whole generation that ruled until 1992, that was the dominant view, that we cannot make this mistake again. And so that same, and that's the dominant view today in 2022, 30 years later, to this day, that we won the Cold War against this Russian version of Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union. And that Vladimir Putin, because he's belligerent, he must be repeating what the Soviet communists were trying to do. That he has resented the breakup of the Soviet Union, and he wants to go back to the glory and greatness of the Soviet Union, but better, without the weaknesses and problems of communism. So as I keep telling people, what happened during the Cold War is really important to understand, because it's important not just for history, it's important not just to understand South Korea, it's important to understand now how Americans, for example, and Europeans are interpreting what are the sources or motivations for Russia's foreign policy today in April 2022. And this understanding, or these inferences, or these assumptions are connected to this view about what happened during the Cold War from 1948 until 1991. And the dominant view, and I don't think it's the right view, but the dominant view in the United States, in Washington, is that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, and this time we successfully contained that aggressive power and saved Mexico, and saved South Korea, and saved the whole world from the latest totalitarian threat, the Soviet Union and communism. Of course, this came to be the prevailing view of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, that it was a diabolical enemy. And this is a danger, not just to the Soviet Union, but for example, what's going on today, that there is no politics in the Soviet Union. And I know we did talk about this earlier, right? But this focus in the media today about how Vladimir Putin, and it's all about Putin, 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 that there's not really, if you read the analyses or the commentary on Russia's foreign policy, you get a sense that Putin is like God. Putin, it's all Putin, 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 Putin. In other words, but we covered at the previous class, you have to have any explanation for an actor's behavior in international affairs in terms of factors at 3 levels of causation or 3 levels of analysis, right? Yeah, Putin is critically important, but we also need to understand Russian nationalism, and we need to understand also the behavior of the United States as part of the international system level, the international political system, the international political environment, which is dominated by the United States, particularly since the Soviet Union broke apart in 1991. And this came to be the dominant view, but during the Cold War, again, and people are not challenging this because we believe that we won the Cold War. So this stereotype and this argument of international relations about states being like billiard balls in a pool table, you don't really need to look inside the politics of Russia or United States or Mexico or South Korea to understand how these countries behave. You don't need to understand the political conflicts and controversies and groups competing with each other and the different ways they are portraying and describing the world surrounding Russia or Germany or France or the United States. No, no, no. According to neorealism, because some of you may be taking Introduction to International Relations and you've studied neorealist political theory, that's secondary issue. It's all about relative power capability, and this is the assumption, this view that the Soviet Union was this, and that the Americans successfully contained it because this country needs to expand. That this kind of regime must expand its power in the world if this regime is going to survive. And if you stop it by containing this evil empire, this Mordor, and evil empire is how Ronald Reagan, the president of the United States, described the Soviet Union. He called it the evil empire in a speech before a church group. If you stop the evil empire from expanding, eventually, sooner or later, somehow, the evil empire will disintegrate. Mordor must expand or die. The Soviet Union must expand or die. Communist China must expand or die. Nazi Germany must expand or die. That's why you contain it, because if you successfully contain it, and they don't really explain how this change happens, and the Cold War lasted a long time, 45 years almost. That's a long time in international relations. So, but that's the nature of evil. Evil's evil. Evil is clever. Evil is dangerous. So, and I think we already talked about this a bit already. So I'm just showing you that this is what I'm going to be presenting at this conference at 11 o'clock this evening. And so what do I think what do I argue are Moscow's foreign policy motivations today in early 2022? And you can see this is my understanding of Russia's foreign policy motivation. Why is Russia belligerent? Why is Russia invading Ukraine? Why is Russia doing horrible things, it's not motivated by national grandeur. It's motivated by national unity irredentism. That this is more like Hitler's regime under appeasement, according to the assumptions of the appeasement strategy. That Russia, of course, there's an element of pride that Russia doesn't want to submit to becoming a second or third rank power the way Italy after World War II or Germany after World War II. Germany, you know, does whatever follows America's lead all the time on the most important issues. Because Germany was defeated in World War II. Italy was defeated in World War II. France wasn't, well, France was defeated by Germany, but France is not a first-rank power. And Russia believes it won World War II. It did save the world from Nazism. Now, maybe they didn't. Maybe if, you know, the Americans would have dropped their atomic bomb first on Berlin instead of on Japan, and ended the war by dropping atomic bombs on Germany. That was the initial plan, right? That the Americans had developed the atomic bomb because they thought the Germans were developing it, and then the Germans surrendered before the Americans finished, so then the Americans used it against Japan. But, and then of course, national unity irredentism, that Kiev and that region is to Russia what, you know, the only example I think that compares today that people know about is, you know, Israel's demand to keep Jerusalem and the West Bank, what they call Judea and Samaria, right? That this is the cradle of their nation. And then also important as personal power of Putin to stay in power and maintain the survival of the regime. And though, you know, this is, of course, you're much younger than I am, so you don't know what Russia was like before Putin came to power in 2000, in the year 2000. So he's been in power for 22 years now, and he was not president from the end of the Soviet Union until 2000. Boris Yeltsin was the president. Boris Yeltsin was a Democrat. Boris Yeltsin was a liberal. Boris Yeltsin was a supporter of the rise of Putin because people were impressed by Putin. I mean, just keep that in mind, that in this chaotic time after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, I mean, it was incredibly chaotic. It's still violent and chaotic. But in the 1990s, as I mentioned to some of you, the gross national product of Russia, the gross domestic product, was about the same as the Walmart company in the United States. Or it was the same, its gross domestic product was the size of Belgium. And it was incredibly corrupt and violent. And Yeltsin was seen to be completely inept. Of course, what could he do? I mean, he had to oversee the transition from communism to a new form of political system. Totally revolutionary change. To go from communism to capitalism with some kind of democracy after 80, 70 years of communism and Stalinism, to transform that country into some kind of capitalist and democratic system, it's never been done before. I mean, and this is true in Eastern Europe to a great degree also, like in Poland and Bulgaria that you've been reading about this last week. These countries, the problems they faced after the end of communism was much greater than, say, Japan faced after World War II, or much greater than Germany, West Germany faced after World War II. Under Hitler, or under the Japanese army, they always had some form of capitalism. They knew what banks were. They knew how to run a financial system. They had the institutions for capitalism were all there. And they remembered democratic political systems before Hitler came to power in 1933. Those people that had been dominating the political system before Hitler came to power, they're still there, hiding in Germany. And so Germany and Japan were completely defeated, and then they had to rebuild themselves. But they had capitalist institutions. In Russia, after the end of the Soviet Union, they didn't remember what capitalism was. They didn't have a memory of what democracy was like. Democracy ended in the 1920s. Capitalism ended in the 1920s. I mean, I think I told you the story. I was in Poland and someone told me I was in Poland in 1988, 1989, 1990, and 1993. And I remember when I was there in 1989, 1990, a friend of mine told me he was talking with a Polish banker because the Polish communist government had something that looked like a bank where you could save your excess Polish money. But it wasn't really a bank. The Polish banker asked my friend, how do you run, what is a checking account? You know what a checking account is? Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, like you didn't know, how does this checking account thing work? What's a credit card? How does credit work? They had no idea. Well, little idea. There were lots of Polish people living outside of Poland who would then come back to Poland and help Poland rebuild. And, so there was a lot of, help from outside of Poland coming back to Poland. But Russia was something else. Russia was the capital of Stalinism. Joseph Stalin was from the Soviet Union. He ruled the Soviet Union. And so Yeltsin was president during this transition, and it was tremendous amount of chaos and violence. And it didn't help that also Yeltsin had a drinking problem. Yeltsin was an alcoholic. And the Americans did everything they could to help Yeltsin stay in power, win the first democratic elections in Russia in what was it, 1996. They had democratic elections in Russia, and the Americans did everything that they could to help Yeltsin set up his government, set up his new institutions, but Yeltsin also, he was sick and he was an alcoholic, and it was clear he was an alcoholic. And Putin was, however, selected by Yeltsin because everyone knew that Yeltsin's days were not long, were limited. And so they were looking for somebody to appoint to serve Yeltsin who could then step in and replace Yeltsin when Yeltsin resigned. And that's what Yeltsin did. He selected Putin, who had been some official in the city government of St. Petersburg. People were impressed by this guy, and then he eventually became Yeltsin's prime minister. Then Yeltsin resigned, I think in, what was it, 1999, 2000, and Putin became acting president and then became the full-time president. And during this time, NATO expanded into Poland and Czechoslovakia, and of course during this time also the United States fought a war against Iraq and began to destroy the Soviet allied regime in Baghdad under Saddam Hussein, and from Putin's point of view, when Russia was at its weakest, the Americans took full advantage of Russia's weakness to destroy Russian allies like Saddam Hussein, and then continue to do that even after Putin became president with the 2001 attacks in the United States on September 11, then to invade not only Afghanistan, but then invade and just eliminate Saddam Hussein in 2003. And eventually turn their attention to trying to destroy the Iranian regime that opposed America, and then moving into maybe Syria and then Libya and so on. But this notion of order as critically important for maintaining the regime of Putin, as necessary to maintain the ability of Russia to organize itself, is an important foreign policy motivation. But most important, I would suggest, is dignity and unity and irredentism. Now, if you're an American Cold Warrior, you say dignity. They have no right for dignity because the Soviet communist system was evil and cruel. And how can they, what's wrong with being like Germany? I mean, America saved the world from that evil and cruel regime. So this is controversial. But again, I don't think this is how the Americans understand Russian foreign policy motivation. The prevailing view in Washington is that Russia's more like Hitler's Germany. that Russia needs grandeur, that Russia needs to dominate Eastern Europe and Ukraine, that, that Putin wants to reconstitute the Russian Empire. And that means subjugating other nations. That this is, I think, more closely what is the prevailing view or the dominant view, not the only view, in Washington. And of course, the European Union. This course is about the European Union. What is the European Union supposed to do as a peace strategy? Are they supposed to blindly follow the Americans? Because if you adopt a containment strategy against this actor, if you adopt containment against this actor that's motivated this way, you can make this conflict and war more and more likely. Because this actor believes that containing this actor is going to cause this actor to believe that the containing powers, they don't want this country to be dignified. They don't want this country to be united. They don't want this country to be independent. So containment can lead to a disaster if your understanding of the foreign policy motivations of Russia is wrong, or your understanding of the foreign policy motivations of Hitler's Germany is wrong. And I know it's not easy to determine why is a country belligerent, but a country can be belligerent and violent because it's motivated by defense. I mean, the Americans killed how many Koreans? They killed 20% of the North Korean population in the Korean War, according to one American general. There's estimates that 20% of North Korea died from American bombing. That's pretty violent. Was America trying to build a global empire at the time, or was the Americans trying to contain the Russian version of Nazi Germany? There are estimates 1 million people may have died in Iraq since America invaded that country 19 years ago. How many people died in Afghanistan? How many people died from the American bombing in Afghanistan? So America is pretty violent as well. But when I encounter the media reports, they say, well, there's this implicit assumption that, well, I mean, yeah, America was violent, but it confronted the evil empire. America was confronting this actor, this evil empire, and America did bad things, but that was because the world was faced with Mordor that wanted to conquer the world and make it all Mordor, like Lord of the Rings. So yeah, America did bad things, but it's the Soviet Union's fault because they wanted to conquer the world. So that's not the same. American violence in Korea and Vietnam and later in Iraq and that's not the same as what Putin is doing in Ukraine. Because America's good. And we prove we're good because we saved the world by containing the evil empire and destroying it. But if Putin says, no, we weren't an evil empire, the Soviet Union was motivated by defense after the horror of World War II, and so this is wrong, we were not like this. So arguing that this was the case 50 years ago to justify what we do in 2022, the Americans do in 2022, is not right. No, it's the Americans that are evil with their capitalist and military circles and groups in the background pulling the strings. It doesn't matter who wins American elections. I mean, sure, the Russians may have helped Donald Trump get elected. We don't really know how much of an impact that social media intervention with troll factories and the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg putting fake news on Facebook and Twitter, how much of a difference that really made. And Trump got elected, but did it make any difference? Trump got defeated in 2016. What difference did that make? It's all, I mean, again, this is stereotyping in this worldview, that it's the Americans that are evil. And this goes back to Stalinism, that there's this world capitalist ruling class that they use elections as basically ways to, make people believe that they should submit, but it's all puppets. They're all puppets whose strings are being pulled by military and financial and ruling elite circles, particularly concentrated in the business sector. They control and dominate the world. And they have elections in America and in Europe, but that's all basically to try to persuade you that somehow you should obey them when they tell you we got to go to war with Russia or China. I mean, stereotypes are simplistic, you're right? They're wrong, but it's human nature to engage in it. So I'm practicing for my presentation tonight because I'm going to say some controversial things, and these are the kind of things I'm going to have to say, and I'm going to have to say it in 15 minutes. And I think some people are going to react in a very resistant way. Let's put it that way. So the question is, how do you tell if a country is belligerent because that country is seeing marvelous opportunity because it sees degeneracy all around it? Is it belligerent because it sees opportunity, a marvelous opportunity, or is it belligerent because it's afraid? And it's not going to say, we're belligerent because we're afraid. No, you can't admit you're afraid. You can't admit you see a terrible threat. Of course, you do see a terrible threat, but you're not going to say that you are, well, the point is, how do you know if a country is belligerent because it sees a marvelous opportunity? And again, Nazi Germany is the best example of a really imperialistic, belligerent, aggressive, imperialist great power, not the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was sluggish. Like I pointed out to some of you in our meetings, right? What kind of Russian version of Nazi Germany willingly and voluntarily gives up Austria after conquering it at the end of World War II? Did Hitler ever give up a country that he conquered? The Americans put a CIA agent in power in Iran on the border with the Soviet Union in 1953, and the Soviet Union does nothing. During World War II, the Yugoslavs overthrew the pro-German king in Belgrade and put in a new ruler who was pro-French. The German response to was immediately invade Yugoslavia and destroy Belgrade. So how do you know? Why is a country belligerent? How do you know if a country is belligerent? Because it sees a marvelous opportunity to expand its influence and domination in the world. First off, ask yourself 3 questions. Is that country motivated by peaceful? What's its priority for peaceful resolution of conflict? Hitler's Germany preferred to use military force. It liked using military force. It wanted to use military force to address its foreign policy challenges. 2, its satisfaction with level of influence exercised in the world. Does that country want the world to stop paying attention to, oh, Washington, you are the benign hegemon, oh, Washington. We look to Washington. Washington, D.C. is the center of the world. The world revolves around Washington, the way the world 2,000 years ago revolved around Rome under the Pax Romana. We shall have the benign hegemony of Pax Americana. And you want to change that. If you're Beijing or Moscow or Berlin, you want people to stop focusing their attention on Washington or London, and you want them to focus on Berlin or Moscow. And thirdly, its satisfaction with the actor system. Does the country that's belligerent tear up other countries and remake them into new countries? I mean, the Soviet, not the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany did that extensively during the late 1930s and through World War II. It broke up Czechoslovakia. It made Slovakia an independent state, and Slovak nationalists still have a sympathy for Germany, even though it was under Hitler, because the Slovak nationalists who view themselves as being humiliated by those Czechs, who thinks that those Slovaks are backward peasants, and Germany helped Slovakia get its first independent state in its history under Father Tisho, Catholic priest, who then after the war he was hung for his collaboration with the Germans. broke up Czechoslovakia, broke up Poland, of course, broke up Yugoslavia and remade them into other states. Those are the three questions to try to determine why is the country belligerent. And the Soviet Union doesn't break up states during the Cold War. If any country's been helping to break up states, you could make the argument it's the United States, right? They separated Kosovo from Serbia. They supported Slovene and Croat efforts to break away from Yugoslavia, undominated by Belgrade. Again, Hitler's Germany is the closest to the ideal model of a militantly aggressive great power we have ever seen in modern politics. Not the Soviet Union, Hitler's Germany. That's the model in reality. Now you can say, well, what's Putin doing in Russia, in Ukraine? He's trying to break up Ukraine. Right? He broke up Georgia in 2008. He invaded and helped two provinces of Georgia break away from Georgia, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and recognize them as independent states. Only recognized also by Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, right? But again, how much of that is a reaction to the Americans, because the Americans did it in Serbia, and the Americans helped recognize South Sudan to break away from the Islamic regime dominating in Khartoum in Sudan to create the world's newest country, South Sudan. The Americans are moving to recognize Taiwan. The Americans may recognize Somaliland in Somalia. It's been de facto independent from the rest of Somalia. Will the Americans recognize the Kurds in northern Iraq? They have a military base there defending the Kurds basically already. Yeah, I'm not saying America's Nazi Germany, because Nazi Germany is the most militant ideal example. So you place these countries on a continuum. I mean, Russia wants to dominate the area of the old Soviet Union. Does it want to dominate the whole world? Does it want to dominate all of Europe? And I'm not even certain if it can dominate all of the old Soviet Union, because next door is China. And China has long borders with Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and the Chinese economy is obviously much bigger than the Russian economy. So, yeah, in the future, I can imagine some kind of conflicts between Russia and China. They've had violent conflicts in the past. In the late 1960s, they fought a border war. Hundreds of people died over the border in Siberia between Manchuria and China. So somebody who doesn't stereotype, right? Somebody who's not engaged in this pathology, this social psychology, this sickness, they see complexity. The opposite of stereotyping is to perceive the target of your foreign policy in terms of the complex nature of their policy-making process in Moscow, in Tokyo, in Mexico City, in Paris, in Washington, in Berlin. There was even complexity in Berlin when Hitler was there. But when you stereotype Nazi Germany as an evil empire, you don't see that complexity. When you see the Soviet Union as an evil empire, you don't see Ho Chi Minh representing an independent force in the form of Vietnamese nationalism. You don't see Kim Il-sung representing an independent, potentially independent force in the form of Korean nationalism. You see the world like Lord of the Rings. There is Mordor and evil versus everyone else who is good. And the agents and spies working for Mordor, like Saruman. You don't see complexity, and it leads to disasters, like the Vietnam War. Vietnamese communists, they have no love for China. China is a traditional adversary of Vietnam and Vietnamese nationalism. China went to war with communist Vietnam in the late 1970s, which the Americans really liked. Communist Vietnam went to war with communist Cambodia in the mid-1970s and overthrew the communist regime in Cambodia, which the Americans really liked. Where's all this global communist empire stuff? These communist countries are going to war with each other. Supposedly, the Soviet Union contacted Henry Kissinger when he was Secretary of State and asked Henry Kissinger, you know, what would the Americans do if the Soviet Union dropped nuclear bombs on China? Henry Kissinger might be lying, but he said that he was contacted. Where's this global communist empire that was trying to take over the world? So complexity is the opposite of perceiving complexity. Political complexity is the opposite of stereotyping. So somebody who perceives complexity describes rather than judges the motivation of the target country as evil or good. And of course, everybody's judging Russia. They're evil. Russia's evil. Putin is evil. He's bloodthirsty, barbaric dictator. The person perceives complexity, sees a number of component interests or motivations, and coming up with a policy that satisfies all of them in Moscow or Paris or Mexico City or Washington is not easy. Putin has got conflicting pressures on him, and he's trying to reconcile them while staying in power and keeping his opponents down. The decisional locus of the target, if you see complexity, the leadership in the target provides some coordination for a large number of competing functional organizations. The decisional style of the target, it's incremental with decision makers immersed in details. So what does that mean? Putin doesn't have a grand strategy, I think, for remaking the Soviet Union in a new form of the Russian Empire. Putin or Donald Trump or Joe Biden or AMLO in Mexico City, Manuel Lopez Obrador, is that his name? Yeah. Or Moon Jae-in or the president of South Korea, or an ambassador or a foreign minister, they get up in the morning and their day is filled with crises, immediate problems regarding their policies and organizations that they oversee that need to be resolved. Big crises, little crises, but filled with crises that require a response now to make that problem go away so that you can deal with the next problem, and the next problem, and the next problem. And there's never an end to the problems. You never address all of the problems and crises that need to be addressed. But some are more important than others. But you never get to the problems at the bottom of the agenda list because you don't have enough time. There's not enough energy, enough time, until one of those lesser problems becomes a big problem, and then it jumps from here to the top of the agenda. And so in this world of the policymaker, in this world of the government official, they're not planning long-term strategies for building a Pax Americana for American domination of the world after the end of communism. People that think in those terms tend to be college professors, not presidents and prime ministers and ambassadors and foreign ministers. But when you look at the sum of all of their decisions, there are these incremental crisis responses to modifying and adapting existing policies and organizations on the basis of what already exists. And they do that every day, all day, and you add all of those little incremental, means step-by-step, incremental decisions, you see a direction, a push, a general thrust, a foreign policy thrust of the country. And definitely, when you add up all of the incremental decisions to crises demands by George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and George W. Bush before Barack Obama and Donald Trump and Joe Biden, you see expansion, 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 expansion. Not because Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Barack Obama have some plan. to establish a global world American Pax Americana. No. But when you look at it, if you are a nationalist like Putin, you say, yeah, you see what they're trying to do? They want to expand and create a global American empire that will lock everyone into submitting to the might of the benign hegemon, the United States, forever and ever. And if you're Beijing and Moscow, you might react negatively to that stereotype of the Americans and intensely oppose it. Somebody who sees complexity, well, Hans Morgenthau was a realist thinker, one of the founders of realism as a theory in political science in international relations. And he had a good description of the elements of power, including national morale and the quality of government. It's not just about military technology. It's not just about the dominance and enslavement of the people. Like, it's not just about the hard power elements of a country in terms of its power capabilities. And yeah, I mean, Putin stereotypes too. Obviously, he misperceived Ukraine as degenerate. Collectively speaking, Moscow misperceived Ukraine as degenerate. So they sent in the military from 5 different points, and they thought they would be able to just basically walk into Kiev in this stereotyped, degenerate, corrupt, decadent state, and they would be welcomed with open arms. And obviously they aren't. They weren't. Russian stereotype too. A country that Ukraine, they believe, is a proxy for American hegemony through NATO and the European Union and the enlargement of the European Union. And certainly Ukrainian nationalists, they want Ukraine to be in the European Union, no doubt about it, with its concern for LGBTQ rights and gay marriage and allowing people to use illicit drugs. This is the way Putin talks. I mean, I'm not saying we should accept everything that Putin says as true, but what Putin says and the Russian government says, that's important evidence. It's one part of the evidence, not all of the evidence, but it is an important part of the evidence. And this is the way they talk about Ukraine. And clearly they misperceived Ukrainian nationalism, just like in a way Americans misperceived the nature of Vietnamese nationalism, or misperceived what they would be able to do in Afghanistan. It's not just the Americans that make these mistakes, the Russians do as well. In the course of intense conflicts with bigger powers, these conflicts with lesser countries, lesser actors, are viewed within that context of the conflict with the big powers of the world. So complexity. And those people disagree with perceiving complexity. I mean, I might see complexity in Moscow and we can have disagreements. But if I hear someone portray Putin as Sauron and Russia as Mordor, I'm likely to believe that person who's portraying Russia as Mordor and Putin as Sauron, they're playing with these symbols because they want to get support from other Americans. They're demagogues. They play with these romantic stereotypes of evil versus good because they want to have power and influence within the American government and the American society, the American state. Those who advance a stereotypical view are demagogues seeking political power. Because stereotypes, you know, they motivate people. They're simple. They're emotional. the Soviet Union is a Russian version of Mordor. Oh my God. Oh, and it is fascinating. I mean, that's why I got into political science. I was a Cold Warrior when I was a teenager. I want to understand, what is this Soviet Union trying to spread communism? Oh my God. Oh, it's so evil. Oh my gosh. I want to understand. That's how I got into this field. It's in human nature to engage in this kind of behavior, unfortunately. Psychological and political behavior. And so, this is my understanding of, I think today, of Russian foreign policy motivation. I'm gonna have to defend this tonight, and I know I'm gonna come under attack. How can you say he just wants dignity and unity when his soldiers are killing thousands of civilians in Bucha, in Kiev? And then I'll say, well, I mean, how many innocent people did the Americans kill in Afghanistan? Oh, no. I can just imagine what the response is going to be. How many innocent Koreans did the Americans kill? Because they are ultimately defensively motivated during the Cold War. How many millions of innocent people died during the Cold War? Oh my gosh, this is going to be. Well, somebody's got to say it. I guess So this was the prevailing view in Berlin leading up to, I think I have it here. Or did I put that here? Oh yeah, here. In 1939, right? In terms of the marvelous opportunity that Hitler's Germany perceived, right? That these countries are all degenerate. These countries are small countries that are proxies for these countries. So this is little Norway, little Belgium, little Denmark, little Netherlands, degenerate proxy of these great powers. And then allies, of course, were Japan and Italy. You know, this is a positive stereotype, but you know, positive stereotypes are unstable. They're derivative and they can change quickly. So you can imagine, for example, if Hitler and Soviet Union was defeated, that there would have been a conflict with Japan or Italy at some point. This is not a very stable stereotype. It's a derivative stereotype of other conflicts. So yeah, Russia today might view China as a great ally, but that doesn't mean it's going to be permanent. You can imagine scenarios where that will change. And I think if I just came back to my mind, if I were a strategist, why didn't anybody exploit that? I mean, Macron was talking in these terms a couple of years ago during the pandemic, that we're pushing Russia into China's arms. Emmanuel Macron said this after the pandemic started, so it wasn't that long ago. We're pushing Russia into China's arms. Do we have to do that? And he was complaining about Donald Trump and the Trump administration's policies. Because there's lots of potential conflicts between Russia and China that the European Union could utilize. Maybe the United States could utilize them as well. And then these are colonial powers. You see opportunities. These states perceived as small, you know, these are culturally similar to Germany and France and UK, these countries, so they're degenerate proxy, but these are considered backward, inferior cultures and weak countries. So they're opportunities to dominate and make them part of your empire. Take them away from the British and add them to and the French and add them to the German sphere of influence. And so what do I think Putin sees, or I gotta stop saying Putin's. Putin's Russia. I think it sees this. So it sees these countries as enemy proxies of the United States, including the European Union, and the European Union's appeal to these countries, NATO and European Union, to absorb these countries into America's world empire, American hegemony. And Russia sees these as colonial power, including Belarus and Central Asian states, Armenia, Serbia, and Azerbaijan. Allies, China, India is willing to cooperate, Iran and North Korea as well. So but that this country is basically becoming an instrument of the enemy through NATO, European Union, these two states. These weak states. And these countries, they can just be controlled non-violently. But these countries, they have to be responded to because they are a danger to Russia's dignity, unity, and regime stability, and Putin's rule. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Let's go back to the, I have to log in, log out and log in again. Oh, I have to log in again. Okay, so we go here to the vote. And so I have a question for you. Please respond to the following statement. Fascism is on the rise around the world. So this has been up there for a while, so some of you have already answered it. So if you'd like to change your mind, I think you still can. One person at least hasn't voted. So please, if you want to, can you change your vote? Yes, you can. So there's 4 people. So why do you think fascism is on the rise in the world? So let me form you into a breakout room and tell me, well, let me divide you into 2 groups, into 2 breakout rooms, and tell me where your group is on this scale. So let me, do I have a, let me see if I got an exercise set up for that. I don't think I really do. No, I don't think I do have a, no. The question is this one. Fascism is on the rise in the world. So let me form you into a breakout rooms, and so we stop the share, and I go here, and I go and form into 2 groups, randomly assigned, go. And so please join the groups. Gloria and Ella in room 1, Anais and Sarah, room 2, and explain your answers to this question. So Sarah should be in, I guess, room 2. Where's Sarah? Sarah?
Yeah, I forgot to enter.
Sarah? Where's Sarah? Can you join?
Yeah.
Okay. Anais. Hold on, I'll put you in room 2.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay, so please join okay, there you go. And so tell me your group's opinion on this question. So you have 60 seconds. So Ella and Gloria talk to each other, and Anais and Sarah talk to each other. So Sarah, can you talk through your microphone to Anais, and Ella and Gloria talk to each other? Explain your answer. Yeah.
And I told me that she chose to be a great
Okay, so if you're agreed, then that means you have a definition of what fascism is. If you say it is on the rise, then what is it? What is this thing that is on the rise? What is fascism? Come up with a definition of fascism, is what I'm saying. So Anais and Ella, Anais and Sarah, and Ella and Kata, Gloria. And I have a definition of fascism, of course. My definition of fascism. Fascism is a regime type that relies upon care plus appeals to nationalism, symbolic appeals to nationalism to control the public. Okay. So let us now flip a coin and see who's going to speak first, room one or room two. Heads, room one. And it's heads, so that means that is Ella or Gloria. So who's going to speak for room one? Heads, it's Ella. And it's tails, so Gloria. Gloria, what did your group decide in terms of defining what is fascism?
We decided that fascism is rising around the world. I was with Ella, so we had two different opinions on it, but not that different. I have a vision based on what happened in Italy with Mussolini, and she has a vision based on what happened in America with Trump, and is rising in politics. My definition of fascism with Mussolini is close to Nazism, but I mean, when we talk about it in class in Belgium, we often bring Hannah Arendt in the debate because she is the one who is expert in the subject for me, and she declaimed that fascism is a kind of how can I say, is I won't base my definition on Nazism, but it's the kind of project of a political figure that its population is divided between what we can see about them is the surface level diversity, which is race, ethnicity, gender, disabilities, and so on.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's a division made by a political figure based on what we can see about their people.
Okay, Ella, do you have anything to add?
Nope, she said it all basically.
Okay, so let's go then to the second group, and that is Anais and Sarah. So heads, it's Anais. Tails, it's Sarah. And it is Sarah.
Well,
Fascism.
It's like a way of organizing people. Well, I think that is like a way of organize people in which is by ruled by a dictator, in which he can control the people in the way that if he or she disagrees, well, it doesn't like take the opinion of that people. So it is like a way of organizing people.
Yeah, regime controls people. Okay, and Anais, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so we actually didn't have the same opinion. Because for me, like I was poor because I had in mind what's happening now in Hungary, where the president is taking more and more important decisions. That's very radical. So,
Okay, yeah, fascist regimes are radical regimes, and again, like Gloria highlighted, the examples again, the best examples of a fascist regime would probably be Hitler's Germany, uh, uh, um, at least among great powers, and the and so if of course, if Donald Trump was moving in that direction, he might have predispositions to move in that direction, but he didn't have enough support among the American public to make his dream come true. And so let me again talk about this relationship to nationalism and foreign policy motivation on the basis of regime type. And just keep in mind that this was the belief that this kind of regime, we see here some discussion of national morale from Hans Morgenthau, that this kind of regime, let me make sure you can see this, go here, needs imperial glory. We said that this was the view of the United States during the Cold War. All right, so this is a very abstract way to understand the nature of the notion of regime. A regime is the kind of relationship, the kind of control relationship between the authorities in the country and the public. How are you controlled? How am I controlled? And if I ask you that question, how are you controlled? And you respond to me like, what are you talking about? I'm not controlled. Well, yes, we are controlled. We might not be aware of it. And if we're not aware of the fact that we are controlled, that's evidence of normative habitual control. This is the kind of control that prevails in so-called developed democracies. Most people don't even think about the authorities threatening them or controlling them, that they must obey the authorities because they are afraid. They obey the authorities because they think they should. That the law is just, that the law is enforced upon, it exists and is right, and you must follow it, not because otherwise you'll be punished. That's important. Coercion is important. But in a developed democracy like the United States, this is the most important method of control. It's a non-conscious acceptance of government authority via an acquiescence in the customary norms through which authority is exercised. It becomes habit. That I should obey the elected officials, I should pay my taxes, I should do it. I feel bad, or I'm doing something wrong if I don't, for example. Even though, well, and then coercion in this very abstract framework is of course another method by which people are controlled by their governments. Do what I say or I'll put you in jail. I'll torture you. I'll kill you. I'll take away everything you own. That's the most extreme form of coercion. All four of these elements are present in all societies at all times. Then, of course, do what I want you to do what I tell you to do, and I will give you prosperity. I will give you material goods. I will give you a good job. Utilitarian economic control. Obey the rules of society as I tell you what they are as the leader, and you can expect to live better next year than you do this year. You'll get a pay increase. You'll be able to buy a car someday, maybe even an apartment. And I'll give you a good job. You'll get a job in a company or a government agency and get the honor and respect of your coworkers and get promoted. And then normative active control is I control you because I appeal to your, this typically today means appealing to your nationalism, your patriotism. Do what I want you to do because we need to save America from the evil jihadists or the terrorists, so that we have to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. Do what I want so that we can defeat the Nazis in Ukraine, if you're Vladimir Putin. Do it for Russia, to defend Russia from the evil Nazis that did horrible things to us 80 years ago. Normative active control. The attraction of support for authority through the device of manipulation of symbols with high saliency. And high saliency today means your national identity. This is what the mass public responds to. Not everybody, maybe not Gloria, maybe not Ella, maybe not me, but your typical members of the public, they do respond to this, particularly during times of national crisis. So which of these kinds of control systems was best at mobilizing the resources of the society to prepare for war? So this was the control system, and is the control system in the United States. Normative habitual control is typically dominant in the United States, followed by utilitarian control, right? That you know that if you follow the rules, you can expect to live better next year than this year. And if you want to join various civil society organizations, if you want to get elected to the school board, if you want to, and you should be able to get a job in a company and have the social influence of your immediate surroundings. And coercion is at the third level of importance, but it's still there and it's still very important. All four of these elements are present in all societies at all times. This normative active control appears during the supposed times of crisis, like after the September 11, 2001 attacks. It's the rally around the flag phenomenon. This is, say, the United States in 1939. What was the control system in Germany under Hitler in 1939? Normative active appeals for the majority of the population that loved Hitler. Keep that in mind. Before the start of the war, the majority of the population in Germany loved Hitler. If Hitler had bothered to have an election, he would have won in a landslide. It's a waste of time from his point of view. But there's a large minority of people that hated this lowbrow, coarse, silly regime with its appeals to this stupid romantic notions of Hitler as a medieval knight fighting the enemies of Germany. This coarse, base, populist government. Populism and then coercion against that large element of society that hates this regime and fears this regime. Minority members, Jews, intellectuals, reacting against this very ugly regime. And then, of course, if you shut up and obey the rules, you can get a job. You can even also, of course, join the party, the Nazi party, or join the secret police, or join the military, and you can have a great job with possibility of promotion and advancement in satisfying your utilitarian participation as well as your utilitarian economic needs. Keep that in mind. Hitler's Germany was also a revolutionary regime. It was revolutionary. It wanted to radically revolutionize Germany in all areas of policy. Typically, to reinstall romantic traditional notions, stereotypical notions of what a good German should do and can do, but radically change the status quo. That's the point I'm trying to make. This is not talking about leftism. This means radically changing the existing norms of behavior that prevail in people's thinking and thoughts and emotions. This is authoritarian populism. This is fascism. Fascism is authoritarian populism. Populism here, authoritarianism here. And then the Soviet Union under the communist regime was this. Coercion. This was a radical revolutionary regime as well. So normative habitual control is at the lowest level, and it heavily, intensely relied upon coercion. Of course, the regime did intensely manipulate symbols of communism and Marxism, Leninism, but that's only going to appeal to a relatively thin section of society, particularly those concentrated in the cities, in this still predominantly, well, it was agrarian society. And if you are willing to speak the language of Marxism, Leninism and join the party, you can get a career too. If you're a young, ambitious, smart boy or girl. Which of these three regimes, so this is not a Russian version of Nazi Germany. The prevailing view in the United States was that the Soviet Union during the Cold War was like this. And to control the people in this totalitarian system, the justification for this heavy burden of control and fear characterizing society was that this is necessary, all necessary to make Germany great again. That German Nazi Party is controlling the life and revolutionizing society, bringing about revolutionary change so that Germany can achieve its natural place as the leader in Europe and the world. This kind of regime must have imperial conquest. This kind of regime must have imperial glory to justify the sacrifices and the control to the public that the regime is demanding. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's hard. But through these sacrifices, we will make Germany great again. And Germany will rule. So this regime has to expand. It has to have imperial conquest to justify the intense control and the allocation of large amounts of money and resources to the military. So if you contain this country so that it cannot expand, you're going to weaken this country's regime's ability, the ruler's ability to rely upon normative active appeals to control the society. And this will decline in importance and in usefulness because you're not successful in expanding your communist empire in Korea and Vietnam and in Chile and in Latin America and in Africa. Because again, the view was the Soviet Union was this in American Cold Warrior views. And this regime had to expand to survive. If they can't expand, this will decline in usefulness, and it will affect everything else in the system, and the regime will either collapse or the authorities will adapt and try to boost these other elements to compensate for the decline in this. And that means engaging in trade and commerce with other countries, doing business with other countries in order to get the economic benefits of trade and commerce to uplift the quality of life of your people, and stabilizing the regime so that people live with less anxiety and fear, that you can know what the rules are. In this kind of regime, in these kinds of regimes, you don't know what you need to do to avoid getting in trouble. Even if you don't want to be political, you don't know what you need to do to avoid being political. You don't know what the rules are in these radical revolutionary times. This is North Korea. This is Saddam Hussein's Iraq. This is probably China as well, with utilitarian being more important, obviously, and normative habitual being more important. So if you contain this country, the regime will eventually have to change. So that's one way to conceptualize the relationship of nationalism to foreign policy motivation. Putin's Russia. My concern is that as the Americans put more and more sanctions on Russia and try to destroy the Russian economy and the Russian middle class, that the response of this regime is going to become even more, moving more in this direction. That Putin can either be overthrown, and remember, Hitler was never overthrown. Fidel Castro was never overthrown. Nicolas Maduro or Chavez in Venezuela, they were never overthrown. The Islamic regime in Iran has never been overthrown. Kim Il-sung's North Korean regime has never been overthrown through economic sanctions, But it will decrease the ability to rely upon utilitarian control, and to compensate, the regime functionally will move more in these directions. Become more militant, more nationalistic. So let me show you a picture of polarization. Fascist regimes rule over intensely polarized societies. This was Hitler's Germany in 1939. This was Khomeini's Iran in 1980 after the Islamic Revolution. And this may be what Russia is moving towards, right? That the majority of the people in Russia loved Hitler's regime in 1939. Percent of the public here. But a large minority of the population despised and hated the regime. And you control these people through terror, through fear. You throw them in jail, you torture them, you kill them. They'll get the message. Shut up. Just shut up, right? This is the American regime. People are here typically. They don't love the regime, they don't hate the regime. This is a healthy society. This is a country that is going to be more and more prone to engage in foreign adventures to justify the authorities' rule in this regime that is very violent, very coercive to its own people. This is how Iran evolved after Khomeini came to power in 1980, and what exists today in Iran. You can make an argument that this may be also what was the United States is moving towards. Trump, the people that love Trump, support Trump, they love him. And there's a large minority of people that hate Trump. And then there's people in the middle in this society that accommodate to Trump and will continue to accommodate. They don't love him, but they will take advantage of the situation to get what they need in that regime. And there's people that are not as courageous and bold as these people, because these people, these are the ones that are arrested and tortured and killed because they fight. These people are too afraid to fight. So they hate the regime, but they acquiesce. So when the world, as you say, the world is moving towards fascism, you're describing a world in which China and Russia and the United States and other countries are becoming intensely polarized. More and more polarized. Again, this is the ideal typical case, Nazi Germany. Maybe moving more towards something like this, like in Iran today. This kind of regime, again, you appeal to nationalism and you use fear and terror against those elements that resist the regime. Illegal immigrants, like 15% of the population in the United States is Hispanic. I think most households, Hispanic households in the United States, have somebody who's living and working in America without documents. So those people are terrorized that their father or brother or cousin or daughter may be found and deported. Other people that are being targeted with fear and terror. There's this movement to make all unborn babies, from the time a fetus, from the time an ovary is fertilized, that fertilized egg is a human being and has human rights. And you as a woman, of course, may not kill that unborn baby. I mean, what? 1/4 of American women have had abortions. I mean, I know women that have had abortions. If they haven't had abortions, they know women that have had abortions. But there's this big push to make abortion illegal to, again, make America great again with those supposed traditional American values, traditional conservative American values that degenerates have undermined with their demands for gay rights and abortion, legal abortion, to undermine those traditional American values that supposedly made America the great country that it was and that it can be again. Right? That's an important element of the degenerate stereotype. How do you view those groups within society who don't believe or view that you have of the wonderful opportunity that because of degeneracy? Those people are themselves, who oppose me, are themselves degenerates, effete, a cancer that needs to be cut out. Okay, I have to shut down the computer so I can record this, convert this file, and then I'll open up the laptop.